record button and turn the proceedings over to Krista and Matt. Welcome.
Aloha mai kako. Aloha. Thank you, Ira, for that introduction. Indeed, Matt is my boss. We are so excited to be sharing with all of you today. This webinar is actually the second in a series, the Mauo webinar series on transformation toward a sustainable future at the University of Hawaii system. So the first webinar that I did was on implementing an S designation program for curriculum. And the next one, which we'll be scheduling soon, is going to be on redefining green workforce and education. We call it the green infused workforce. So we're really excited about that. And today's webinar, as Ira said, will really share some of what we're digesting from our 5th annual Hawaii Sustainability in Higher Education Summit, which was just a week and a half ago. And the focus of that summit was the meeting of wisdoms, indigenous perspectives and Western global perspectives on sustainability. About a year ago, a new word was introduced in the Hawaiian lexicon, the word Mauo. And I want to talk about this word for just a minute, in particular, the way it was created from 2 existing Hawaiian words, Mao, the stability, the unbroken continuity, stable state, and then O, that's the well-being, the healthy state. What we love about this word is that it shifts us from sustainability into thrivability with that well-being piece. But the word Mao, the endurance, unbroken continuity, appears in the state motto, Ua Mao ke ea o ka aina I ka pono. This state motto appears on the seal of every campus in the University of Hawaii system. And this gold seal is the seal for the Hawaii University system. Now, as I was putting this webinar together, I discovered that the UH system also has its own motto for the system. And the translation of this motto is above all nations is humanity. And as we get into the content of today's webinar, I think that that motto might give you what we call a chicken skin kind of moment. So I want to thank everybody who's listening. I know it's a small audience, but I think an important one. If you're listening to this webinar, I know that you are engaged in a similar transformative and complex work. So I really want to thank everyone who's listening. All of the webinars have been with such awesome presenters. Deb McNamara, I totally use those books. And the upcoming webinar with Eric Asadorian, just amazing conversation. And I really want to also thank Ira for the just tireless work to keep meeting and bringing this conversation together. I know that if you're listening, I also know you're really, really busy, and I know that you're multitasking because that's what I do when I listen to webinars. So I want to invite you just for literally 1 minute to put down whatever you're doing and take a breath and put your feet on the floor. And we're going to start with a dedication. Think about indigenous wisdom and what this means to you on your campus. There are 100 million indigenous people in the world, and every campus and every community in North America has some intersection with indigenous communities. So 1 minute, just set your mind on that.
just for a day, our king and queen would visit all these islands and saw everything. How would they feel about the changes of our land? Could you just imagine if they were around and saw highways on the sacred grounds? How would they feel about this modern city life?
Wow. Hello, everybody. This is Matt. I'm just dealing with some chicken skin, literally, on that song. You know, if you've not heard that song before, I think it really captures the sort of lament and the sense of sorrow and of deep pain that is wrapped up in the complex history of our island states, colonial and plantation pasts. And without going into too much detail, the history of these islands in modern times involves an illegal occupation and overthrow of the Hawaiian monarchy by the United States, led by some wealthy American businessmen towards the end of the 19th century. And it's against this complex backdrop of deep cultural wounding that we find ourselves doing this work. Some of the fundamentals I think that we're going to land on today will be simple, but I want to make the distinction between simple not equating to being easy. So with that in mind, some of the university's history with regards to embracing sustainability as an institutional priority is actually fairly recent. Executive Policy 4.202 was developed with feedback from literally hundreds of people across all 10 of our campuses, and really started in and around the end of 2012. The university has a rich history of really leading edge research, teaching and learning in the natural sciences and in climate change science and in sustainability. However, we have not until recently articulated sustainability to be specifically a priority for our institution. So we recognize that gap, that we did not have anywhere in our policy a mention of sustainability towards the end of 2012. And so in 2013, we convened a gathering of key people from faculty, staff, and from students across all 10 campuses to come together and review a draft policy that we presented for feedback and review. We got really detailed input on that. Then those delegations went back to their campuses and sought additional input from their campus communities. And then was not until 2015, I was formally hired by the university sometime in 2014. And from day one that I started at the university, that draft policy went through at least 19 additional drafts before it was finally ready to be able to be passed into formal policy with a swipe of UH President David Lasler's finger across his iPad at our third annual Sustainability Summit in 2015. So just to put that into some context, the last time that UH had amended its policy on a similar scale was around 10, 15 years ago to articulate Native Hawaiian studies as an institutional priority, and to really embrace its role and articulate, make explicit this focus of being a leading indigenous serving institution. And so now, 10, 15 years later, there's funding and resources and buildings and programs that are available. And that might be some helpful context for you all on the call to understand where we are with regards to integrating sustainability as an institutional priority for the University of Hawaii. Is this me? Oh, yes. Okay. Go ahead.
So you're just.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Okay, so the policy articulates sort of 5 key areas of focus: research, curriculum, operations, community, and campus engagement. Those are probably elements that are similarly reflected in policies that you may have at your institutions. When we put the draft together, we looked out across the landscape and drew from other universities' policies. The UC system policy really was helpful in us crafting that first initial draft. One thing that we heard loud and clear during that stakeholder meeting process was that culture and cultural connections was something that was missing from the initial draft that we presented for feedback and review. And we heard resoundingly is something that is fundamentally important to our identity as a university and appropriate to our unique place in the world as this one of the most geographically isolated landmasses in the middle smack bang of the Pacific Ocean. So cultural connections was really something that rose to the top as a unique distinction for how our institution is going to embrace sustainability. And since then, it's been an interesting journey to think about how does one operationalize and integrate, put into action and practice the notion of cultural connections.
Thanks, Matt. I want to share a really personal story. I've worked in the University of Hawaii system for 17 years. And about this time last year, I was completing a 2.5-year term as department chair for developmental studies. I'm a professor of English. And it was a really complicated time. There was a lot of transition. It was difficult. There was a lot of tension. There was a lot of politics. And my position put me in a conflict and tension with a very powerful and outspoken Hawaiian faculty member. And this departmental tension exacerbated some existing tension around sustainability work. And it became, for me, a type of academic bullying situation. So this person, he said things in meetings like,
why should students have to take developmental English? Why not everybody else take developmental Hawaiian?
And he said,
our students will not succeed if we keep hiring people who aren't from here.
And I knew who he was talking about, being the English teacher and the only haole in the room. And he said at one point that I couldn't teach Aina-based learning because
you have no relationship to the Aina.
Tears were shed. In fact, I've seen other people in tears on campus, even Hawaiian faculty, because they weren't Hawaiian enough. The situation became, shall I say, fraught. And the truth is that for a decade, the Sustainability Committee had been meeting on campus without participation from the Hawaiian faculty. It was kind of like, you do your thing and we'll do our thing. And this all really came to a head. For me, personally, it came to a head when kind of a neutral colleague reported to me that a presentation from the Sustainability Committee, which was made by one of our science faculty, she said it just hadn't been well received by the Hawaiian Council. So I had this total freak out, like red face, crying, bursting out into tears, freak out. And it went something like this. This is a pre-recorded dramatization of my freak out. We're going to try it one more time. Doesn't he realize that pollinated birds are practically dead? What's wrong with him? Doesn't he realize that all the native birds are practically already dead? We're going to do something. We're going to I apologize if you couldn't hear the recording. It really was so such an intense moment for me. I could only recreate it. It was maybe a mashup of some different things that I said or maybe thought at the time. And my point, what I wanted to convey is that, you know, this degree of upset, it just can't be productive for sustainability efforts. It was so stressful. I met with a psychologist about my stress level, and she told me I wasn't the only client talking about workplace stress in academic environments. The tension became so noticeable to others that at one point in a very closed door meeting, I was invited to join a discrimination lawsuit against this individual. And I said, no, I prefer to deal with this within myself. I decided to approach the situation by asking, you know, what was I doing aside from my blonde hair and being the teacher of an oppressive written language in an oral culture? What was I doing to magnetize this tension towards me and toward sustainability? In Gestalt psychology, this is called shadow work, looking at aspects of ourself that we might dissociate from and then project onto others. What was I doing, and how could I shift my own perceptions and my own actions? And what was it about our campus environment, and specifically our approach to sustainability, that was contributing to these tensions? How could we create an integral sustainability? Integral means inclusive and non-marginalizing and embracing. Sometimes when we institutionalize things, we also can dehumanize them. So being an academic and kind of a nerd, I turned to theory and frameworks, and I applied the Wilbur Coombs framework to the situation. And for myself, using this map was so interesting and useful. These maps that Ken Wilber defines are like subconscious maps, almost like grammars that influence the way we experience others and the way we sort our perceptions. So when I applied integral theory to the situation, I realized that this person that I had the conflict with was coming from a we space. He was coming from a tribal place of defending and speaking for a particular people. And when I understood, I could look at where I was coming from, and I really felt that the point of tension was really an opportunity. We're all trying to evolve. So I love theory, but I also know that the best way to learn, I was told, is go out and get your feet in the mud. And I've had this opportunity as well. Working in the lo'i, the taro patch, is a really powerful outdoor classroom experience, let's say. So I had the opportunity to go to Ka'ala Farm, where they're doing a lo'i restoration. And being in this context, the teaching, the pedagogy of the lo'i, the stories of each of these beautiful ridges, the sharing of culture and story and chant, and the healing of community that I was a part of. And for me, the experience was powerful and healing in that I felt included and I knew what to do. As in, sister, take up those huli and move them over there. I was called sister, and I knew what to do. This experience was so powerful, and this photo is actually from our summit, where we actually took our entire delegation into the lo'i to experience this type of transformative learning. back in my office and back in my comfort zone, I turn to literature and books in the field. I love to put ideas together and synthesize what are we saying in the zeitgeist. So one of the books, these are all the books that I've read in about the last 6 weeks, I'm not kidding. One of the books was Indigenous Peoples' History of the United States. And this was a very difficult read. It's things that I thought I knew, but this expression was very difficult. Talk about having a shadow. How, as a society, do we reconcile who we want to be, who we see ourselves as, with this history? These are some of the other works that I've read, some of which we shared with the delegation at our recent summit. At the same time, I also enrolled in a MOOC on Indigenous Canada. At the same time, I'm aware of, and I haven't read all of these, but there's practically this whole genre predicting the demise of higher education. So I've read several of these books, and the arguments start to overlap. And so the audience on this webinar would, surely know the conversation predicting the demise of higher education. It has to do with, declining enrollments, disruptive technology, sort of the flawed design of higher education in silos, and a lack of evidence for student success and a lack of evidence for learning. So it doesn't take a total genius to look at one set of literature saying, look at how important this wisdom is, this indigenous wisdom and knowledge. Look at the problems and failures of institutions of higher education. How can we put those together? I don't want to give up on higher education. I don't want to make argument like those books. At our recent summit, we had an electronic poster session, and we can design courses like this one, right? From doing the S designation, I've had a chance to work with faculty who are developing these incredible courses in climate change related to food security. Here's a course on pollution, and this amazing course on creative thinking that's being taught. So we have these incredible resources, starting with the faculty who are engaged in sustainability. And I want to focus on that and how can our institutions, get out of our own way and allow this shift to occur in the classroom, right? The students are part of this transformation. Every incoming class of students has a deeper sense of kuleana and hope and positivity. The students are so inspiring, and they told us at the summit that they want to know how to do this work.
Thank you, Krista. I just want to take a moment to acknowledge your bravery for being willing to be so vulnerable and for so authentically and fearlessly sharing your experiences. And I also want to take a moment to acknowledge everybody that's on the webinar for your contribution to creating a safe space for this conversation to happen. Because I really do believe that that is one of the simple, though not easy, fundamental practices of all of our work. The shot that you are looking at now is from that first summit that I had mentioned earlier at 2013, where we were reviewing and seeking input on our draft sustainability policy, where we heard loud and clear that cultural connections are a unique factor for the University of Hawaii. This image was taken from the Space Shuttle Columbia by Lacey Veach. Now, Lacey was Hawaii's second astronaut with NASA after Ellison Onizuka, and he flew 2 missions on Space Shuttle Columbia. He was not actually from Hawaii, but he loved Hawaii dearly, and specifically fell in love with our voyaging canoes, and immediately saw the connection between the traditional voyaging canoes and Hawaii's future. On one of his shuttle flights, Lacey was able to stow away the ads that you see here, which he received from his grandfather. This stone came from Keanakakoi, which is an adze quarry located about 12,000 feet above sea level on the slopes of Mauna Kea. You may have heard of Mauna Kea being in the news with regards to some of the controversy and the conflict around the 30-meter telescope and the sacred space of Mauna Kea, the slopes of Mauna Kea. It's a very special place for Hawaiians, and ancient Hawaiians worked in sub-zero temperatures to make these adzes. So Lacey actually took this photo of this adze, his grandfather's adze, floating in space with Mauna Kea behind it, framed by the cockpit window of Space Shuttle Columbia as he's flying 160 miles above the Earth's surface. And in many ways, as I've been reflecting on what this term, the meeting of wisdoms, means, this image, I think, really uniquely illustrates the rich complexity that that term offers us a doorway into. Now, why is this important to our work and at University of Hawaii? You may have heard of Nainoa Thompson, our master navigator, who is currently leading the effort known as the Mālama Honua Worldwide Voyage. Lacey and Nainoa managed to cultivate a really deep relationship. And this image had a profound impact on Nainoa Thompson. In the 70s, Nainoa set out to recreate and rebuild a traditional Polynesian voyaging canoe. The knowledge of celestial navigation and voyaging had largely been lost in Hawaii. And so he actually went to Micronesia, where he learned from master navigator Mauo, who has since passed on. You also may have heard of the Eddie Aikau surf meet that happens only when Waimea Bay is reaches a certain size of waves. And Eddie Aikau was lost at sea on one of Hokulea's early voyages. Hokulea was transformative in that it proved, when Nainoa and his crew of navigators, apprentice navigators, successfully navigated in their traditional voyaging canoe across the Pacific from Hawaii to Tahiti. They proved by doing it that the Polynesians were able to actually settle this vast ocean landscape known as Polynesia. And that really sparked a sort of a cultural renaissance in Hawaiian culture and Hawaiian language. And we still sort of feeling the impacts of that today. The current Mālama Honua voyage actually is scheduled to conclude this summer. Hokulea is currently back in the Pacific, having circumnavigated the globe, using only traditional methods, so no modern instrumentation. And the point of the Mālama Honua voyage now is to explore this meeting of wisdoms, is to seek out other communities that are feeling firsthand already the localized impacts of a changing climate, and to share and explore ancestral knowledge and how they are adapting to these modern challenges in real time. Wrapped up into that is an intergenerational transfer of knowledge and of leadership. So the next generation of navigators have been key and instrumental and are currently navigating the canoe on its final voyages back to Hawaii. Now, what does that mean to UH? Well, it so happens that our president, David Lasner, who you can see to the right of the image here, wearing the white aloha shirt and the tea leaf lei. And you can actually see Krista and my head sort of growing out of his shoulder behind him. That is Linda Ferruto to his right, who established the Ethno-Mathematics Institute, which teaches mathematics from a voyaging canoe, which is a fascinating subject in and of itself, and you could spend a whole webinar on that topic alone. To Linda's right is Nainoa Thompson, who, in addition to being personal friends with David Lasner, has an official post as a special advisor to the UH president. After David Lasner formalized the sustainability policy for UH, he was spending an awful lot of time with Nainoa, and we would sometimes get emails from him at 1 in the morning saying, you know what, I've been talking to Nainoa again, and he's shifting my paradigm on the sustainability thing, on how I understand this. He later shared more publicly a personal epiphany that he had, which was that in his travels and his work throughout all of our campuses, he was meeting with multiple groups, the Malama Honua Voyagers, for example, who are working on establishing voyaging curriculum at university campuses. There's also Ike Hawaii, or Native Hawaiian indigenous wisdom sort of practitioners. There's the whole tribe that's working on sustainability and sustainability curriculum coordination and sustainability integration into how we plan and operate and manage our physical facilities, you know. And then there's groups like Sensors, Science Education for New Civic Engagement and Responsibility. And what President Lasner shared with us is that he was hearing similar concepts being discussed by these different groups. Then they were certainly distinct, but they were also very similar. And so his epiphany was, why are these conversations happening separate from each other? What are the resonances between these different groups? And how can we more fully realize our potential to our students, to our communities that we serve, and as a model indigenous serving institution? What happens if we were able to convene a meeting of wisdoms between these different groups? And so he physically convened a gathering in February of 2016 to specifically explore this meeting of wisdoms, and asked us as a collective to figure out and explore, continue to explore what resonances lie at the meeting of Ike Hawaii and sustainability, of ancestral knowledge and modern empirical sciences, of global and continental understandings of sustainability and active island notions and ideas and practices of sustainability. And it was at this gathering that we were introduced to the word Mauo. And a key part of this story that I think merits retelling, we're sitting in the room as Dr. Larry Kimura is introducing this new word in the Hawaiian lexicon to us. We literally feel the earth shake. And me being really focused on energy management, physical infrastructure, I immediately think, oh, something's wrong with our HVAC system. Mm-hmm. We actually learn later on that literally the earth did shake, and there was a minor earthquake, which is in my reckoning is not insignificant. I think a key component of the definition that was given to us for Mauo, the perpetuation of well-being, is this. It's almost a footnote that's embedded in the definition, where it says, quote, "Formerly, there was no need for the word Mauo because it was a normal part of Hawaiian life. Today, it is critical that we distinguish between what is sustainable and what is not," end quote. That is really significant. If you unpack that a little further, sustainability there was no need to make that word explicit in traditional Hawaiian culture, because the end goal was not to survive. The end goal was one of mala ma'aina, of taking care of the land, of taking care of that which feeds you, and actually going beyond that to notions of aina momona, or an abundant land. And it really shifts fundamentally notions of what is possible. What is our true human potential? Is it to achieve survivability, or is it to act as stewards, or even go beyond stewards to act in relationship with the land, to not just survive, but to thrive and to flourish. So embedded within the last 5 summits that we've convened has been ideas and explorations around the notion of allyship and what it means to be in relationship with a place and with a peoples that is from a specific place. And really to get to a fundamental understanding on both sides that your destiny and my destiny are inextricably intertwined and interlinked, right? And so we did not make that explicit into the experience of the summit that we've just convened, but we did pay careful attention into how we designed it into the experience of the summit. So how do we create an experience of being an ally? And we came up with this exercise, which has been one of the most highly rated aspects of the summit, of pairing up people with a buddy. And so people had to take a moment at our first morning break and go and find someone that was as opposite to them as possible, and then to find out more about them, who they were, what their name means, where they come from, and what ancestor they were bringing into this safe space that we were all co-creating together. So the buddy exercise was a way that we designed and embedded into a physical experience this notion of allyship, so that we could give people an experiential understanding of what it means to be an ally. Recently on social media, there's been some fantastic memes floating around given the current state, shall we say, of geopolitical affairs. And one recent meme that I've seen was talking about the difference between what it means to be an ally and what it means to be an accomplice. And I'll sort of paraphrase, but if I am wearing a safety pin on my collar to show and signal that I am an ally, okay, is that more about me, or is that more about the peoples who are needing those allies, right? Does that safety pin on my collar mean that I am willing to go to the mat for the people I am in allyship with, or I purport to be in allyship with? Does that mean that I'm willing to go to the front lines and perhaps be an accomplice and be arrested if need be? What lengths am I willing to go to stand up for what is right? Put another way, maybe in less harsh ways, my grandpa was a pub owner, and so this was would be a story that would resonate with him. A buddy is someone that you have a drink with after work. An ally stays out with you to 2 a.m. singing karaoke, and an accomplice wakes up in the jail cell next to you in the morning after. So embedded into these are profound concepts, but that doesn't mean that we can't approach them with some levity, right? I mean, satire and being able to laugh at ourselves is one of the most powerful tools sometimes, especially in situations where we're being asked or challenged, rather, to speak truth to power. This image is taken from the summit, and we asked our General Assembly to sign up for huaka'i, learning journeys that would take everybody off-site. And so we were able to take about half of the General Assembly out to 2 separate cultural sites to give them this embodied experiential understanding of systems thinking, of being in community, of creating a relationship to a place, of being allies and accomplices. And here they're literally accomplices. Some of the background context to this image, where they are at, are ancient lo'i that were actually reoccupied and reopened by Uncle Eric Enos in the 70s and 80s. And it was a really confrontational. It was a real struggle for Uncle Eric to go and reopen and restore the water to flow in these ancient lo'i. Is really part of that broader cultural renaissance that was sparked by Hokulea's initial voyage. And before we could bring our summit delegation to these sites, we first had to invest, we meaning Krista and I personally, had to go there and meet as people, right? With the people of this place who were stewards of this place, so that they could understand what our intention was, so that they had veto power and could vet and meet us and make sure that we were meeting them on their own terms, so that we could understand the deeper context and understand how coming here, we could actually help them to achieve the goals that they're working towards, right? So it was not like, hey, we really want to bring our people here so that we can give them this experience. Obviously that's what we're thinking and behind, but we have to approach it from a perspective of how can this help you to achieve your goals, to overcome in your struggle. And that is a relationship that we need to continue, and we are continuing to cultivate. So we're planning to go back after the summit to make sure that, to check in and see how that was for them and to continue to cultivate that relationship. This image is also really striking to me because it really depicts that we are equals, we are all equals in the mud. Where else in the experience of higher education do you have students, faculty, and facilities working together as equals in the service of a greater good, you know? And that is some of the background of our Meeting of Wisdoms panel, which has literally taken us the better part of a year to assemble. And who you're looking at here, so much respect for Manulani Meyer. She has deep, deep roots in community here, comes from a very well-respected and highly active family of Hawaiian, Native Hawaiian scholars and activists. Manu spent a good portion of her career also in Aotearoa in New Zealand and has established some deep roots there as well. Manu actually obtained her doctorate from Harvard University and was exploring sort of notions of Hawaiian epistemology, and is very well respected, very well traveled and looked up to. She currently serves as the Director of Indigenous Education at UHSUSTAINABILITY. We spent the better part of a day about 6 or 7 months prior to the summit, going out, meeting with Manu, and again, asking her what she wanted to see from a summit that was coming to her campus. So how could her campus and their work benefit for having hosted the other 10 campuses? And then we really took great thought and care into designing all of the elements that she had requested and expressed into the design of our summit. And then to put this panel together, I'll really briefly introduce you. Noah Lincoln is of Hawaiian, German, and Japanese descent, born in Kealakekua on the Big Island of Hawaii, a graduate of Yale and Stanford Universities, currently studying indigenous crops and cropping systems. This is Rosie Allegado, born and raised in Oahu, daughter of a grassroots community activist and professors at UH, graduate of MIT and Stanford, currently studying microbial community dynamics to understand the impact of land use in fragile Hawaiian estuarine systems and modeling the microbial processes underlying indigenous native Hawaiian sustainability practices. Pauline Chin is a professor in curriculum studies at the College of Education, whose teaching and research center on science education relevant to Hawaii's unique biocultural systems. Tim Botkin practiced environmental law for 16 years, was a judge for another 7 years in land use and development in his community in the northwestern continental United States. And moved to Maui to serve as the program director for Maui's Sustainability Science Management Program. Albie Miles received his PhD at UC Berkeley has held posts at the Organic Agriculture Program for the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, and is the director of our brand new Bachelor's of Applied Science with a focus in Sustainable Community Food Systems at UHSUSTAINABILITY Oahu. And finally, Aurora Kagawa was raised on Oahu in a Chinese Hawaiian family compound, is a graduate of MIT, and is currently a doctoral candidate in the Department of Geography at UH Manoa. We literally spent hours with each of these panelists to help them to understand the broader context of why we were asking that they come and participate on this Meeting of Wisdoms panel as the marquee framing event for our entire 5th annual summit. And they really reflected deeply on how they were going to approach this panel. And I will say that at first, when I approached most of these individuals, there was their guard was up, the caution was high. In many institutions of higher education, our faculty have been, quite frankly, traumatized. I kind of think of it as PTSD for institutional trauma. They're very inhumane conditions that are created by the social architecture of our institutions. And so a lot of the initial questions I got were, who are you? What is your intention? Is this a safe space? Why are you doing this? How authentic can I be? Are you asking me to be another, quote, talking head, you know, to so that you can check the box of having cultural practitioners speak at your conference, so that you can check the box of having diversity? Or is this a place where we can go deep, raw, and authentic? And it really, you know, took a lot of effort to be able to create a safe space to have this kind of conversation in a very public forum. We live streamed this entire opening plenary on the internet, and then it's been archived online for future viewing and future reference so that we can continue this dialogue. And then it's actually going to be edited into episodes that will air on community public access television throughout the islands, and it's actually broadcast beyond Hawaii from what I understand. Now, the questions that we were exploring in this Meeting of Wisdoms panel is, one, how is the Meeting of Wisdoms important to our work in the classroom and as an institution? Two, are we adequately equipping our students for the climate change impacts that they will experience in Hawaii and elsewhere? And three, what impedes transformative change at the University of Hawaii, and how could we do better? These are almost existential questions. It's really difficult to have an authentic conversation about this at an institution of higher education in closed doors, let alone in a very, very public forum. And so again, we were creating a safe space, right, to start to restore and rebuild trust and rebuild human connection and relationships so that we can ultimately rehumanize our institutions.
We've been digesting this panel, and we'll be sharing the link so that you can also listen to the panel yourselves. We've been digesting and distilling what we learned. And so this is kind of a working title. I love frameworks the same way I love theories and I love books. I love frameworks and I love Venn diagrams. What did we learn from the summit? Ike Hawaii, indigenous wisdom, comes down to sense of time. How do we use time? How do we count time? What is our experience of time? Things like, you know, credit hours, and what is space? What is place? What is a classroom? What is inside? What is outside? What is the relationship to the context, the specific ahupua'a, the location of that learning? It comes down to relationship. What is the relationship of the faculty, the administration, the students, the relationship between faculty and students? And what is the relationship to the aina? that which feeds us, the land and the sea. And I love the term that Pauline Chin used. She talked about enchantment, which really captures the sacred and spiritual relationship to the Aina that we can all connect to. What do we learn? What do we use from global conversation on sustainability? The 4 pillars framework: environment, economy, social, cultural aspects of sustainability. We use the 7 core concepts of sustainability that we talk about in our S designation. The 17 sustainable development goals. How do we bring that in to blend with Ike Hawaii? And then the piece that we also realize we need to bring in is civic engagement and civic action. There was a survey done, national survey by NERCI, asking what are we talking about when we talk about civic engagement? And really kind of a gap even in service learning programs, community engagement program, there's kind of a gap in actually teaching civics, the levers of power. And the students at our summit, they told us that they had a strong sense of kuleana, or responsibility, and they want to know how to do things. They want to understand the levers of power, and they need to develop change agency, which includes hope, self-efficacy. So we're calling this an active island sustainability framework, and somewhere in the center, we learn how to ho'o Mauo, how to perpetuate our well-being. One of the books that I mentioned was called Braiding Sweetgrass, and I love this image of a framework that's a braid. And the author talked about the metaphor of a braid. And when you make a braid, one person holds the end and the other person moves the strands. So it takes 2 people, it takes a relationship, and it takes tension. You have to hold the braid taut in order to create it. So how can we braid all of this together into our sustainability efforts? And then Matt and I were talking about metaphors and frameworks, and he reminded me of the Mobius strip that is used by the resilience, and he shared with me this image. So I'll let Matt, if you want to give some closing words.
Sure. So if you're not familiar with the body of work that's emerged over the last decade or so around resilience thinking, I encourage you to look into it. It's been really, it was really developed to think about biocultural and social systems as separate though interlinked systems. And it's been really helpful in understanding how systems reach a certain threshold and then will rapidly shift into a new regime, be it from sort of macroalgal, or sorry, coral dominated to macroalgal dominated, and thinking about how do you actually create the conditions to revert back? And sometimes once you cross a threshold, you can't actually go back. And in our work, I've been thinking about how this applies to social systems, for example, of our institution. So one of the guiding questions that we go back to in all of our work for catalyzing a rapid diffusion of sustainability across curricula is, how do we create conditions for change to occur? I'm going to repeat that. How do we create conditions for change to occur? Now, in that panel that I was talking about earlier, the Meeting of the Wisdoms panel, I encourage you to take the time to look at it. What's really striking to me is that we were having, in front of 150 odd people, a really raw, quite frankly, conversation that covered themes of, local and global climate change impacts, to issues of Hawaiian sovereignty, to mulch as a high technology, and the sort of complex thinking that actually goes into this type of a simple, quote, simple application of mulch, and the many different sort of permutations and variables of mulching applications and technologies. And even, you know, ideas and really vulnerable stories, similar to what Krista shared with you earlier, of personal experiences encountering embedded institutional racism. You know, in a room full of 150 of your, not just academic peers, but of staff, administration, and students, knowing that this was being broadcast even further, and then knowing that our president was actually in the room for a good half hour of this panel discussion. To me, our work in sustainability is really about catalyzing institutional transformation. So how do we rebuild trust? Trust is based on future expectations based on past results. So in that context, how do you restore trust? One small win at a time. Keeping your word, keeping our word, even on the smallest of things, becomes so important, because that is literally what authentic relationships are built upon. And building authentic relationships takes time and requires that you fully invest yourself. You know at a cellular level if someone is not being authentic with the time and attention they're investing in you. And the flip side of that is when you fully invest yourself, you are taking a risk. That is always risky. How do we rehumanize our institutions? Well, I think we start with thinking about what are the right questions to ask to get to that end. Who are the people that we need to build relationships with? Are our sustainability initiatives inclusive? Is everyone at the table in these conversations? Who's not at the table in these conversations? Are the experiences that you are creating tangibly different from the institutional experience that people might be used to? How do we create these safe spaces to rebuild trust? If our society is to succeed in adapting to climate change and actually repairing the damage that we've done to our life support systems, in time for our species to survive, we must act rapidly and we must act at institutional scales. And in order to do so, we're going to have to rebuild trust and rehumanize our institutions so that we can catalyze institutional transformation.
Thank you, Matt. I'm so happy that we still have time for some questions. I'm going to give everybody, as we did at the beginning, just 1 minute to digest those thoughts and maybe think or type into the chat box what your question is. And I'm going to leave you with another dedication and just ask, is this a completely out of context appropriation, or is this an authentic honoring? How do you see it? Could it be a meeting of wisdoms?
You can join your energies with us for just a bit of a prayer here, okay? Just a bit of a prayer.
Ira, thank you so much for allowing us this opportunity to reflect and share this transformative work that we're all engaged in. the University of Hawaii system and at your own campuses across the continent and around the world. Mahalo, Ira.
Thank you, Krista, and thank you, Matt. That was, I'm sure everyone on the line and those who will listen to this recording will agree, that was an extraordinary presentation. At turns beautiful, insightful, and brave. So thank you both for sharing that with us. I also want to congratulate both of you on your recent summit, and in particular for all the effort that you put into the Meeting of Wisdoms panel, because the outcomes were certainly worth the effort. There were a handful of points that you raised that worth giving you both an opportunity to reinforce or elaborate on. And I'll just throw 2 or 3 of them out there and let you guys react to them as you wish. One is the concept of a safe space. It came up in at least 2 different ways in your presentation, and I've heard that phrase used in a surprisingly large number of contexts in the sustainability space. And I wanted to get your further thoughts on whether that notion of safe space is something that almost rises to the level of one of the hallmarks of sustainability. Another aspect that came through for me is Krista's emphasis on frameworks. That may be because my students also chide me for how much I love frameworks, and you both shared a number of different frameworks that all of us can immediately utilize, but if either of you wish to say a few more words on the efficacy of using frameworks in the classroom setting, that would be great. And finally, among the many other things that you mentioned, for those who are on the line who did not attend the first webinar, maybe at the most fundamental level, you referenced a couple of times the EST designation, and perhaps not everyone on the line or listening to the recording will understand exactly what that is. So I'll turn it back to you, Krista and Matt.
Those are great questions, Ira. I think I will first talk about frameworks. I think frameworks are most useful, like the Active Island Sustainability Framework. I haven't thought of that in a classroom context, but they're really useful as common ground, which I think is actually a foundation for safe space. You know, would it be weird to say that a framework helps us to create a safe space, really? I actually used that Active Island Sustainability Framework just yesterday in a conversation around service learning and civic engagement. You know, how do we consider all those things equally? Frameworks help us structure, you know, sort of our cognitive structures. And another thing I would say about that is one of the conversations that we had with Manu Lani-Meyer, if you picture that framework of the Ike Hawaii circle, the sustainability circle, and that like a Venn diagram, right? The period of, or the place of overlap, where is the common ground? And she was able to say in one of these meetings, we were actually talking about the S designation and trying to translate that with the Hawaiian framework and the Hawaiian interests and goals in terms of curriculum. And she just said something like, well, you know, I don't love everything about this, but you know what, there's no more time. So let's just go with our common ground. Let's just go with it. We're going to support this, and we're going to support each other because there's no more time. So I want to say that. On the S designation, what I love to most emphasize about it, to me, is not about the designation, it's about the process. If we do this right, then in 10 years, we don't need a designation, because it would mean we had transformed our classroom spaces, transformed our curriculum, transformed the function of our institution. So it's not about the designation. To me, it's just again, a framework. It's a mechanism for creating interdisciplinary dialogue, peer-to-peer professional development, and making the work that goes on between faculty and students in classroom spaces, making it visible to students so that they can find the resources that they need to learn what they are most seeking. Yeah, and I think I'll let Matt address your question further about safe space.
Thanks, Krista. Actually, before well, maybe related to this, so part of the read ahead materials that we asked the General Assembly attending the summit to read was a draft concept paper that Krista and I put together based on we're currently on draft 5, and it's exploring the nexus of Ike Hawaii and sustainability. And it's sort of our attempt to articulate, in black and white, all of these different ideas that we have been hearing as we've traveled through the campuses. And I think we'll include that as some of the follow-on resources for everybody on the call. I want to pull up an image, go back to an image here as I talk about safe spaces of the first sort of meeting of wisdoms gathering, and tell a little bit of the backstory here. Krista, I hope you don't mind. When I asked Krista to join us at this, the individual that she spoke of earlier is in this picture. He was present there. And Krista told me that she does not feel safe in the same room as this person. And as she was telling me that, was tearing up. Such was the depth of the scar and wounding and hurt that she'd experienced from this person. And so, I said, well, I completely understand. You have something really valuable to contribute to this conversation. That's why I'm inviting you to join in. This is a space that has been opened up for us, and your voice is really very important. And for what it's worth, if you want, I will physically be by your side for the entire time to ensure that no harm comes to you. And I have no problem, just on a personal level, going to the mat for you if need be. And Krista said, let me think about that. And very bravely, her voice was still trembling the next day when she called me to say that she was going to do it. Did it. To this day, I'm still impressed by her willingness to make herself uncomfortable and to put herself out there. This webinar and the content in it being yet another example of that. Something also related to safe spaces that emerged from last year's summit. A lot of the work that we do, I draw from the work of KUA, which is an organization that coordinates statewide networks of cultural practitioners. And actually, the social architecture underlying that is very similar to the thinking behind ours, of us as a network coordinator, as a hub backbone organization. KUA plays an additional role where they serve as code switchers and advocates. So if you imagine, for example, a group of cultural practitioners working to establish rules with the Department of Land and Natural Resources for community-based natural resource management, literally 2 different languages and 2 different paradigms encountering each other, and KUA acts as that interface such that they have been successfully able to establish a framework for community-based natural resource management. And so, one of the things that Kevin Chang, the executive director of Kua shared with me was, bruh, building community is messy. That is just the nature of this work. Human relationships are messy. They get really uncomfortable. And one thing that he was telling me, that it was suggesting to me that I get really good at, is one, not to take anything personally, and two, to develop my empathy muscle, to develop my listening skills, to be able to just hold space for people to express, you know, their need to be heard, to express the wounding that has happened to them. Just the act of having someone provide a safe space for you to express the hurt that you may have experienced can be so healing in and of itself, you know? And the institution of higher education, as academics, you are trained with an almost violent code of communication. You defend your thesis. You are taught to critically analyze and deconstruct and think, right? Where in the academic experience are we taught how to collaboratively communicate, how to seek out the middle ground and build together to advance? As sustainability practitioners, we get that. We understand that that is fundamental and intrinsic to the work that we do. This notion of multidisciplinarity, interdisciplinarity, and moving to transdisciplinarity. So bottom line is, I think it goes back to personal work. And Krista really neatly models that when she was sharing the story of being invited to participate in a lawsuit and declining that, and choosing to look at that, as painful as it was, as an opportunity for inner exploration. You know, to be an effective leader, that requires leadership of self. I'm somewhat strange if you've not ascertained that by now. I tend to think of this work as fractals. So the same fundamental principles that are required for us to ask the hard questions of ourselves, right? To be effective leaders of self. Those fundamental principles are expressed differently in different contexts. When you're talking about leading a small group, same fundamental principles, different expressions. When you then scale that up to leadership of a statewide network of distributed campuses, same fundamental principles, different expressions, which I think also, ironically enough, goes back to this notion of frameworks. So what are the core guiding fundamental principles? And then how do those get expressed differently in different contexts to be effective?
Excellent. Appreciate your responses to those three questions. I agree completely with where you ended with the core principles and applying them in different contexts. This was really great stuff. I look forward to seeing the final version of your concept paper. I hope you will share it with us and allow us to post it on the SCC website, where, again, to remind everyone who joined late and has stuck with us to the end here, the full webinar recording will be posted on the website, also on our YouTube channel. The website for information on our activities and services and our upcoming faculty conference, again, is curriculumforsustainability.org. And again, Krista and Matt, really appreciate you taking the time to share all these insights with us. Truly extraordinary.
Mahalo, Ira, and I really look forward to seeing you in Philadelphia.
Excellent.
Mahalo, you guys. Really appreciate the time. So aloha and ahui ho, which means till we meet again.
Thank you both. Bye-bye.